Hello and welcome to this absolute masterclass in cold calling. So if you are someone who is currently or someone who wants to get into cold calling, then this is going to be the only training that you need to go through to absolutely fill your diary full of meetings from cold calls. Because when it comes to cold calls, they are one of the hardest skills to learn in sales. But I have seen entire businesses being built off the back of a good cold calling system. So it is still something that works very effectively today, and it is a skill that we need. Imagine if we could find a way of turning strangers into money. Well, that is an extremely valuable skill that you need to learn in sales. So in this training, we are going to go through an absolute masterclass in cold calling. We are going to make sure that by the end of this training that you leave fully understanding the cold outbound system by phone. We're also going to make sure you know exactly how to structure your calls, and you're going to be able to create master scripts for cold calling, which means by the end of the training, you're going to book more appointments from your cold calls. Now, one thing to note, this is going to be an absolute masterclass in cold calling. There is going to be so much information we are going to go through, and there is no fluff to it. It is very direct. So make sure that you bring a notepad to this training. Be prepared to pause a lot and make a lot of notes, because we're going to go through a lot in this training. So let's start this masterclass by looking at the principles that we need to apply to master cold calling. Now cold calling is just cold outreach by phone. You know, it's where we call people that don't know us and we try and set appointments and bring them into our sales process. Now, I know cold calling has such a negative stigma around it. People say that it doesn't work, that it's not effective, but I see day to day how effective it is. People often rely on emails or DMs because the truth is they just don't want to cold call. It's not that it doesn't work, it's that they don't want to do it. You know, I've coached thousands of people in sales, and a lot of those people are new business owners that need to cold call to set appointments for their business. You know, they'll have to reach out to people who don't know them and try and set meetings with them. And usually it's going to be between calls, emails, and DMs. But I see day to day the power of cold calling. It is still the most effective way that these people are booking in meetings. It works so much more than emails. It works so much better than DMs. Cold calling is still the number one way that people are booking meetings in. But there are still a large percentage of people who do cold calling and it doesn't work. And that's simply because they suck at cold calling. A lot of people who try cold calling are not salespeople, or they've never done cold calling before. If you take someone who's used to end of process sales and stick them in a cold call environment, even they will still struggle. That's because cold calling is an extremely hard skill to master. You are speaking to strangers who don't know you, who may not be interested in what you do, and you have to speak to a lot of people. You have to work very hard if you want to do cold calling effectively. But the main thing to understand is that it is a skill, and like all skills, it takes time to develop. You can't expect to be great at something you've never done before. And if you're in sales, you know, you can't adopt an attitude or a mindset of avoiding something just because it's hard work. Because yes, sometimes it can be challenging. Sometimes we can reach out to people who receive a lot of cold calls. They're busy people who don't want to be called. We can catch the wrong person at the wrong time and they can be rude. But if that happens, so what? The worst case is that someone can hang up on you or they'll swear at you. But you know, whenever I've dealt with these people, I'm always grateful, because it means that I never have to speak to them again and I can just move on to the next person. They've saved me time, which is my most valuable resource, especially when I'm cold calling. Sales definitely is a different place today. You know, we're in a new age of sales. These pushy old school tactics, they don't work anymore. You know, it's more than just ringing enough people, forcing something down them until at least one of them books a meeting on with you. You know, we have to focus on quality now, not quantity. But when it does come to cold calling or cold outbound in any form, it is still going to be a numbers game. And that's because conversion rates on cold outbound are always going to be low. You know, it's not like closing where you close at 30 to 50% on average. You know, you're looking at more 5 to 10% when you do cold outbound. So we still have to go through a lot of numbers. That means that we're likely to deal with 95% of people who are going to say no. We cannot avoid that. So what I say is invite the no. Every no you face in cold calling, every rude person you deal with, everyone who's not interested, everyone who doesn't have the time to speak to you, well, they just bring you one step closer to that yes. You're never going to book an appointment with everyone you speak to. And even the best cold callers on earth get 4 times as many no's as they do yeses. So what they understand is that the people who are those strong no's, the rude people, the people who just want to push you off the phone, they would never have been a yes. So the quicker you get through these people, the quicker you get to your next yes. You know, I've done a lot of cold outbound roles. I've done cold calling. I've even done cold events where I've had to walk up to people, not ring them, actually physically walk up to them. I had to turn strangers into people who gave me their bank card in 15 minutes. You know, I've had to acquire multi-million-dollar properties off a cold call. I've brought new clients into my agencies from cold calling, but I've also trained thousands of people to book appointments through cold calling. The reason that I and a lot of other people have been so successful with cold outbound, with cold calling, is because they adopt the mindset principles that we need in order to master cold calling. You know, and this is what we're going to go through first, because this is the most important part. It doesn't matter if I give you the perfect script. It doesn't matter if I give you the perfect training. Unless you can adopt these mindset principles, you cannot be effective at cold calling. So these are the principles that we need to apply. This is what is going to allow you to actually master cold calling, but also how you can do it consistently for the long term. Now, the first and most important principle when it comes to cold calling is that cold outbound we don't see as the end. I never saw myself as a cold caller. I never focused on just the activity of cold calling. You know, when I used to sell charity and broadband packages to strangers on the street, I wasn't doing it because I wanted to sell charity packages to strangers on the street. I was doing it because I was told if I do it long enough, my company is going to invest in me, set my own company up, and I'm going to be a business owner. So cold calling or cold outbound wasn't the end. It was the means to my end. When I was a property broker in Dubai, cold calling people for new listings, I wasn't a cold caller. I was a property broker. I wasn't there to just sit there and cold call. I was there to make serious money and build my reputation in that industry. But I had no connections, so I had to cold call. It was the means to my end. So if you do want to master cold calling, then you need to ask yourself, why are you cold calling in the first place? What is the end goal that cold calling will bring you to? Because I've cold called in jobs even with no outstanding end goal in that job. You know, where it was just me getting paid to cold call. But I always knew that what that was for me was a step in the right direction. I wasn't going to be a cold caller forever, but I needed to do it to build the right skill set so I could get to the position I wanted to get to. So again, if you can master cold calling, if you can master a way of turning strangers into people who actually pay you money, then that is an extremely valuable skill that you can bring forward to any opportunity you go into. You know, when you cold call, you are not some annoying cold caller. Have the confidence, have the conviction in yourself, and remember why you're doing it in the first place. You know, you're there to either build a business or develop your skills or gain freedom or build your reputation, whatever it is. Live in the ends and not in the means of cold calling. This will help you to avoid that fear you get of cold calling people. Oh, I don't want to be rude, I don't want to be intrusive, what if they say no, what if they're rude? Who cares? It's just a means to your end. That's the mindset that you need to adopt. And when it comes to the other principles, you know, the other thing that's helped me stay on track, but even improved my performance, was I actually started to enjoy it. I made it fun. You know, I found a way to have fun with my cold outbound rather than just dread it all the time. You know, what really helped me cold calling was being able to do it with other people, not just on my own. You know, turning it into a competition, turning it into a game, actually having fun with it. So if you are cold calling, then if you're doing it in a job, you'll do it around other people already. But if you're doing it on your own, then you need to join a community. You need to join a group of people doing the same thing as you. Because trust me, there are plenty of those out there. You know, something I always push for in my training, and hopefully you're part of it already, is community. It is getting involved with other people doing the same thing as you, on the same path as you. You know, when you share your wins, when you share your challenges, your loss, you perform better because the wins feel bigger. The losses don't feel as bad. You don't take them as personally. And after this lesson, I want to make sure that, you know, action step right now, make sure you are either in or you join a community to do cold calling in. You can compare notes. You can go through your wins, your losses. Trust me, it's going to keep it something you enjoy rather than something you dread. And finally, there is one last mindset principle that you absolutely need to apply to not only cold calling, but all sales, and that is conviction. You know, the number one reason that people don't book many appointments in, and the reason that I personally see when I coach a lot of people, is they lack conviction. You know, they lack conviction in themselves and what they sell. You know, they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe they can get the results, or they know enough about it. And this is what stops them booking in meetings. It's what stops them selling. Ask yourself now, if you got a new client from your cold calling, or if you passed it on and someone closed that client, are you 100% confident that your company or you can deliver on what you're selling? Because if the answer is anything other than 100%, then this is what you need to address before you go any further. You know, if you don't believe in what you sell, how do you expect other people to believe in it too? When it comes down to conviction, it's going to come down to three things. It's either that you don't know enough about what you sell, you haven't actually seen it work or don't believe it can work, or you just lack self-confidence. But if you have a high level of two of these things, then it can make up for a lack in one. So let's cover these points. Now, the first reason you probably don't have conviction is that you just don't know enough about what you sell. You know, you fear that you might come across as incompetent, or they're going to ask you questions you don't know how to answer. And that means that you're consciously or even subconsciously avoiding the situation itself. And this is the big reason why people prefer email over cold calls, because they don't want to be in that situation where they don't know what they're talking about. But if it is this reason, then you just need to go through more technical training on what you sell. You need to improve on your offer knowledge. You know, join courses, scour YouTube, ask for additional training, do whatever is necessary to make sure that your product and offer knowledge is unquestionable. Because the bottom line is, if you're unconfident because of this reason, you are just lazy. That is all it is. When I was a property broker in Dubai, we had a 3-week training before we were let out in the world and able to sell. And that training I did in 2 days. I made sure that I went home and plastered on my wall every single thing about every building, every apartment that I was going to possibly let out and sell. And I didn't leave that room until I know every single fact and figure off the top of my head. Now, that is product knowledge. Today, we need to adopt more offer knowledge. Not only just what we do, it's how we help people and what we help them to do, but you have to focus on having the right technical knowledge. And you cannot be unconfident because you don't know enough about what you do. Again, this will just fall down to laziness. That is it. I used to be a top performing salesman because I made sure that I had the most product knowledge out of anyone in that company. The next point, if you were lacking conviction, it could be that you don't believe in what you sell, as in you don't know it can get the results you're saying it can do. And this is really down to the fact that most people, they need to see something before they believe it. So if you haven't physically seen your offer work, you haven't actually seen the results of it, then this could be causing a lack of conviction. So if you sell something that's already getting results, then make sure that you get amongst those people that are producing those results and have got those results. You go ask them questions, you go follow their step-by-step process, because the closer you are to it, the more you will believe it. You know, speak to other people who work in the industry if you haven't got them yourself. You know, go through, again, more training. Just live in as close as you can do to see the results of what you do. And again, if you haven't had any results, you're a new business trying to sell your own services, then you need to be extremely high in the first point. You need to make sure that you go out there and have the most technical knowledge you can have, and that will make up for any lack of conviction because you haven't seen the results. And if you still have a lack of conviction and you are selling something that you do, then you need to offer it for free. You need to do it for free until you can have that conviction. You know, getting to the point where you can sell something for money is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And there are so many companies out there who, before they release something to market, they have done market research, they have done focus groups, they have tested it, they have gone through utter iterations of their product to make sure that it works. And that's before they even release it and try and sell it. And sometimes they even pay people to do the work for them so they can have some form of testing. Now, I'm not saying you need to pay people to do work for them, but that is the step-by-step that most companies go through. So if you lack conviction because you don't see the results, then this is what you need to do to get over that. What you need to understand, that if you're trying to sell a service for, let's say, $1,000, $1,500, that's not going to change your life. But having the skills where you can then sell that service, that is what is going to change your life. So stop rushing the process. If you're unconfident, there's a reason for it. So this is what you need to address. And then that leads me to the final point on conviction, which is self-confidence. I mean, self-confidence in itself is conviction. It is one of the most important things in sales. A high level in self-confidence can even override the other two that we spoke about. You know, in all sales, This is what is going to be important. This is what is going to make up for any lack of sales skills or understanding, is having that conviction. And I want to show you a clip of one of my most favorite sales clips to illustrate how important conviction is.
Hello, John. How you doing today? You mailed in my company a postcard a few weeks back requesting information on penny stocks that had huge upside potential with very little downside risk. Does that ring a bell? Okay, great. Well, reason for the call today, John, is something just came across my desk, John. It is perhaps the best thing I've seen in the last 6 months. If you have 60 seconds, I'd like to share the idea with you. You got a minute? Name of the company, Aerotine International. It is a cutting-edge, high-tech firm out of the Midwest awaiting imminent patent approval on a next generation of radar detectors that have both huge military and civilian applications. Now, right now, John, the stock trades over the counter at 10 cents a share. And by the way, John, our analysts indicate it could go a heck of a lot higher than that. Your profit on a mere $6,000 investment would be upwards of $60,000.
Jesus, that's my mortgage, man.
Exactly, you could pay off your mortgage.
This stock will pay off my house.
John, one thing I can promise you, even in this market, is that I never ask my clients to judge me on my winners. I ask them to judge me on my losers because I have so few. And in the case of Aerotine, based on every technical factor out there, John, we are looking at a grand slam home run.
Okay, let's do it.
Now, in this scene, this was actually based on a true story. So he probably has no real knowledge about this company that he's trying to sell, so no product knowledge. He probably has no idea if this stock can do what he just said it is, so no real belief in the offer either. But what he does have is 100% conviction in himself. And while this is very old school sales, what I'm not saying is to lie and manipulate to try and sell things. What I'm trying to tell you is how important conviction is, and for you to see it in action. Like I said, it can make up for a lack in the other 2 points. That is how important self-confidence is, especially in these environments. And that's really what I applied in my own sales journey. When I had my first agency, my first business selling agency services, I secured a client from a cold call, or a meeting from a cold call. I then pitched them a website for 18 grand. And I'd never built a website before. I'd never seen the results. But what I did make sure I had was a high level of technical knowledge, so I had my product knowledge, and I had self-confidence, I had self-conviction, and that's why I sold that website for 18 grand and then ad services for 2 grand a month after that. For some people, self-confidence will only develop over time. I get this. So you'll have to go through that process. You'll have to start building your skills step by step. But maybe that will come down to offering free stuff until you're more confident. But maybe you're setting for someone else. You're doing this for someone else. You can't offer free stuff. But you can build your self-confidence in other areas. That is what you have to remember. You're looking at the ends of what you're doing, not the means. Remember that you're doing cold calling in the first place for a reason. Remember that you have to invite those no's to get the yeses. Remember that nothing bad can come from cold calling. So what? Someone hangs up on you. Then what? Remember that the only one who's going to believe in you is going to be you. So if getting to the place you want to get to through cold calling, again, building a business, developing your skills, whatever it is, if getting there is that important to you, you will find a way to be confident. Because if it's not, you're just going to find more excuses. So we need to apply these principles when it comes to cold calling. Take these mindset principles, apply them to all of your sales. Without them, this is where you're going to be destined to fail over and over again. So if I give you the perfect training, perfect script, it's not going to work. Make sure that you have taken notes. Make sure you've got actionable steps to start putting those things into place, and get ready to go through the structure of cold calling. So what we're going to go through now is taking a higher level approach to cold calling, thinking about where cold calling sits within our sales process so we can know how to structure it. When it comes to structuring cold calls, like every step in the process, we have to know where they sit within our sales process. So there's 2 things we need to be aware of. What types of leads we're dealing with, where they've come from before, and what stage we're sending them to after the cold call. So where we sit in our sales process, understanding before and understanding after. We know that we're reaching out to cold leads. This is cold calling. It's people who don't know us before. So we know where they're coming from. But what that does mean is we have a choice who we cold call. And this is why cold outreach is basically just advertising. It is essentially just hyper-targeted advertising, where we can actually speak to someone, so we get to pick who we speak to. What makes a good ad though? That's how we need to think about it. When we target the right people with the right problems, with the right message, and we position ourselves as the solution, that is how we do it. And then also, building trust and value, that is what makes a good advert. So that is what makes good cold outreach. So this is why cold calling, you have to be clear on who you're reaching out to in the first place. We want to reach out to people who are likely going to be a great fit for what we do. They have the problems that we can actually solve. We position ourselves as someone who can solve them, So success in cold calling comes down to these points. And like everything in sales, we have to operate on quality versus quantity. When it comes to picking the right people to call, the more niche you go, the smaller your audience, but the more likely it is you're going to have better conversations and book more calls. But the broader you go, the more people you will have to cold call, but the less likely it will be that you'll book a call in with them. So just going through those principles, it's the same principle with every part of sales. The more specific you are with who you serve, what problems you help them to overcome, and what the results are, then the easier it is to sell to those people and get results for them. What you do is you then use those results to get more case studies, more testimonials, attract more suitable people into your process, and then it becomes easier to sell to them, they get better results, and you just go round and round and round. But you would then be limited by the amount of people you can contact. So you can be limited on that fact. But if you take those broader approaches with who you deal with and what you do for them, then you're not going to be as limited as you would in the last, but it's going to be harder to get more people through that sales funnel. Because it's going to be harder to sell to them because they don't have enough trust that you can actually help them specifically. Then it's going to be harder to get results for them. And then even if you do get case studies, that case study is only really going to apply for a small percentage of people. So again, you have more opportunity in terms of the volume, quantity, but it's going to be lower quality. So this is something you need to start thinking about. Because mastering this comes down to picking the right person to call in the first place. The more niche you go, the stronger your offer, but you'll have less people to call. The more broad you go, the weaker your offer, but you're going to have more people to call. So here is my personal suggestion when it comes to picking the right people. If you are an established business already, you have dealt with clients, you have got them results, you've got case studies, go through those case studies. Look at who the type of people are that you generate the best results for. Understand what problems they had and how you solve them, and pick your top 1 or 2 niches and go for similar people as them. If you are someone who doesn't have a lot of results yet, then pick 2 to 3 niches to target, and you'll have more flexibility while still being targeted. You'll base it on businesses you have the most understanding with, or you feel you can get the best results with. And what you need to understand is their language, their jargon. You need to understand their metrics, because they need to feel that you actually understand them. Make sure that you know what problems that they have and what you can do to solve them. Stop trying to force feed them your service and try and fit problem and solution around what you do. Do market research. Ring these businesses first and just ask a bit more about them if you don't know any of these things. Like I said earlier, that's what companies do. They do market research. And who you pick is not going to change the structure of your calls, but it is going to help you craft a better message for them. So make sure you spend time choosing the right people to contact. The right audience will increase your rate by up to 1,000%. I've seen this make the difference between someone booking at a 1% rate and a 10% rate. So this is why it's so important. So we understand who we're trying to deal with. Now what we need to understand is where we're going to send them to. This is another big mistake that people make in cold calling. They try and book someone in for a closing call straight off the back of a cold call. And what that really causes is a high no-show rate, a low close rate, and a lot of follow-ups. And here's why. When we look at a sales funnel, when we have this high level view of what we need to do to turn strangers into sales, there's different stages that people need to go through in that sales funnel to proceed with a sale. They need to be turned from a stranger to a lead, from a lead to an interested lead, to an interested lead to a hyper interested lead, and a highly interested lead into a sale. We can't cut corners. And while they go through those stages, they also need to have these 5 things built and confirmed as they go through. And this is what I call the pillars to sales. Now, these things are value. They need to see the value in what you do, and they also need to believe it's worth the cost. They need to then trust you to deliver on it. They need to believe it's the right fit for them. They need to believe it's the right time to start, and you need to be speaking to the right person with the right authority to make the decision to actually go ahead. Those are the pillars to sales. But the most two important pillars are trust and value. So if you try and shortcut this process, if you don't take the time to build enough trust and value, then that's why you're getting, oh, I need to really think about it, I'm not too sure. You're following up with people and you're not able to close because you're shortcutting the process. So every step in the sales process needs to prime the next step. So when you're turning strangers into leads, you need to make sure that you're making them more problem aware. When you're turning leads into people who are interested, you need to start qualifying them. When you're turning interested people into highly interested people, you need to make sure that they understand the concept of what you do. And then when you're trying to sell to people, that's when you're trying to sell your offer. So if you're speaking to a stranger and then trying to sell them your offer, you are not qualifying them, you're not making sure they're bought into the concept of what you do, and that's why you're not able to close. So remember, every step of the sales process, you need to consider where the lead has come from and what type of lead it is and where you're sending them after. And then you need to prime them for the next step. So if you think about your whole sales funnel, are you taking prospects through those stages? Are you building those 5 things, or are you rushing someone through without building them? Value and trust, they take time to build. That is something to understand. So the amount of trust and value you have will also dictate how much time someone gives to you. My ads are 1 minute long for a reason. If I could get away with showing an hour-long ad where I give everyone every single thing they need to know to buy, well then that's what I do. But because they don't know me, they're not going to give me much of their time. So all I can get on the first touch point is a very short call, which is why cold calling needs to be very short. The trust you build will mean they will give you more attention as they progress down your sales process. You know, if you already though have a lot of leverage, if you have a lot of authority, a lot of credibility, it just means you've got more trust, so they will give you more attention. You know, that means you can demand a little bit more time earlier in the process. Your overall cycle is going to be shorter, but by the nature of cold calling, you probably don't have these things. That's why you're doing the cold calling in the first place. So this is why the next step after a cold call needs to be a triage call or a discovery call. I'd also recommend reducing the time you're asking for, especially if you're new. You know, if you want to do these calls close together, you know, that's definitely the best thing to do because interest fades over time, but trust is built through touch points. So asking for a 20-minute phone call off a cold call is going to be a lot easier than asking for a 45-minute Zoom call from someone who doesn't really trust you. You know, a triage call should take no longer than 30 minutes, to be honest. But that is how we are going to structure these calls. More importantly, let's look at the master framework for cold calls, how to script out your cold call scripts. So we know what mindset we need to apply. We know how to structure these. We know who we're reaching out to. We know the next step in the process. So it is time to learn the master framework of cold calls. Now, this framework is a framework, it's not a script. The reason we use frameworks and not scripts is because authenticity is priority above all. What works for me is not going to work for you. So if I give you my script, it's not going to work for you, or it's not going to work for most people. And other thing to remember is how you speak is a lot more important than the words you say. You know, effective communication is a lot more about how than what. If you're trying to say things on a script you wouldn't normally say, it's not going to deliver right and it's not going to be effective. And also, your first script is not going to be your last. You have to constantly change little bits as you progress. So again, we can't rely on having this script, because real conversations, they aren't scripted. They go off on tangents. But that being said, what we're going to do is we are going to write a script with this framework. And then we are going to relentlessly practice our script. So it is muscle memory. So you can recite it off by heart. You can deliver it in the right tonality. We are going to do that so it is baked into your memory. So you're not stuttering and panicking on your cold calls and you don't know what to say because you have your script to fall back onto. And you're going to say it so much that you can adapt it on the spot. But this is why you're going to relentlessly practice what we write today, because that's the only way you're going to do these calls not sounding scripted. It's also why we're going to write it as you would actually say it. So as you're writing speak out loud as if you're saying it in a real conversation. If you wouldn't say it in real life, then you're not going to write it down. That is the number one rule. This is the master framework for cold calls. We have an opener, we have the problem confirmation, we have value and trust builder, we have offer positioner, we have offering the call, and then either confirming that call or handling objections. The opener is where we're going to actually open the conversation, warm the call up. The problem confirmation is where we're going to confirm that this lead has the problems that we help them to fix. The value and trust builder is where we're going to build value and build trust in who we are and what we do. We're going to come across as an authority that can actually help them. The offer position is where we're going to then position our offer as the solution to their problems. And then finally, we're going to try and book the call in from this cold call. We're going to cover the opener first. Now, this is where we're going to open the conversation, because in most cases, people don't really like cold calls. They don't like cold callers. So this can be the most difficult part to get through. And there's no real one approach above all. There's not one approach that works best for everyone. Like everything in sales, you will have a style. So what we're going to go through is a couple of different options when it comes to openers. Because whatever approach you take, you need to be able to do it to warm the call up and get through the open. Because at the start of a call, your prospect's guard is going to be very, very high. So we need to be able to pass guard. Now, the more natural and genuine your approach, the more success you're going to have getting through the opener. Because if you come across like you're stalking them or you're looking for something out of them, a lot of the time you won't be able to get past them. So if you come across as too salesy, a bit disingenuous, if you come across as unconfident, you are going to lose them in the first 5 seconds. The opener really is the most important part. Because like I said, when it comes to sales, as someone progresses down your sales process, they're going to start with a very high guard. And it's going to be lowered as they go through. And then as they go to the end, where they've actually got to pay you, that guard is going to go back up. But what we're going to focus on is this beginning stage. Guard is going to be extremely high cold calling people. So taking a few seconds to warm your calls up to lower that guard is imperative when it comes to cold calling. So what we're not going to do is cold call like this. Oh, hello, is Martin King available, please? Yeah, this is Martin. Who's calling? Oh, hi Martin, my name's Connor and I'm from Fresher Marketing. I just actually wanted to call you because I run an agency that focuses on helping people like you grow with lead generation. So I just wanted to see if you're interested in getting more clients. Beep. And that is the point that they hang up. And I've seen so many people do this time and time again and then say, oh, cold calling doesn't work. I wonder why. If you start cold calling, when you just jump straight in, who you are, what you do, what you're looking for, that's where you're going to be met with the most resistance. No one wants to have their day ruined by someone like that, cold calling them. So stop acting like a cold caller. We need to find a way of warming the calls up instead. And that approach is going to be based on your own personality. So we're either going to be a very direct approach or a more personal approach. So starting out with direct cold open. Now this is where we're going to start the conversation being extremely direct about what we're here to do. And that's where you're going to see all of those cheesy sales lines you've probably seen online. And this is exactly why starting the call directly means just saying, hey, this is a sales call, do you want to proceed? That's essentially what the direct open is. So it's going to look something like this, of like, oh, hey, look, I know you're really busy, I'm busy too, I'll be really quick. Or, hey, I'm going to be honest, this is a cold call, but it's definitely one you want to hear. Or, hey, if I said this was a cold call, would this ruin your entire day? So something like that. That's where you get these cheesy sales lines. And personally, I don't like these. And I don't like them for a very specific reason. Not because they don't work, because I have used these and I have made these work plenty of time. I can do these, but not everyone has that style. It is a very specific person that this works for. So when majority of people try this and it doesn't work, that's why I don't like it. The pros with this approach is that you are not wasting any time. You're just going in and seeing if someone is interested in what you do. If they're going to be interested, you know that they're going to be a good conversation. But the problem is you're going to go through a lot more people and you're going to have a lot less success rate getting through the opener. So you are going to focus on quality of conversation, but you are not going to get through the quantity. And you've set the expectations right from the start with this. So you can just go straight into what you do. There's no fluff and you don't have to take too much time. And this also allows you to be a lot more direct when people push back. So when you objection handle on cold calls, you can follow that very direct style if you start with the direct style. And if you do it right, honestly, people can really respect you for this. I've seen people have great success with this approach, but again, it's not for everyone. It is very hard to do right. It's only suitable for a very certain type of person in sales. And when it's not your style, you are going to have no success in this. It's going to be extremely low success rate. And what we've got to remember is, like I said earlier, when you act like a cold caller, you're treated like a cold caller. So when you are saying you're a cold caller, a lot of people are going to treat you as such. And when you say, hey, is this a sales call, do you mind? You're giving someone an opportunity to get off the sales call. You're giving them an open to leave the call, which is something I don't like to do. A big problem with this approach though, is it is so fun to watch someone do it, but it's very hard to emulate. You know, you see a reel of someone doing it, you try it yourself, and then you wonder why it doesn't work. Again, and that's because it's only suitable for a very certain type of person. It's a very old school sales approach. You know, it's suited for more extroverted people who are high in salesmanship. They have good confidence, good personal communication, and they are great with their tonality. They also are people who have a lot of work ethic, because you have to go through the numbers with this approach, and you have to be extremely resistant to rejection. It's water off a duck's back if you're going to use this approach, because you will face rejection a lot. But the key to this approach is that it needs to be your style, a bit old school salesman. You need to have fun with it. You need to genuinely enjoy this approach. Delivery is the absolute key. So it's calm confidence, but also a bit cheeky. It's cheeky salesman energy. You need to live in that and be prepared for a lot of pushback with this approach. But the next style is going to be the personal style. This is my preferred method. And this is where we're going to personalize our openers and have a bit more of a natural reason for us reaching out. It's a bit more of an indirect style. You know, we're not coming to that call acting like a cold caller. So we're going to try and compliment the business or the person we're calling. We're going to try and warm up that conversation and appear to have a more justifiable reason why we're calling. And the reason I prefer this style is it works for a lot more people. It's a lot more relevant for majority of people for doing cold calling. So the first part is just having a more natural way of coming across this business. So I usually say something like, oh, hey, look, I was looking for an electrician in the area and I've had quite a few people recommend you guys. Or, you know, what works better if you can have a mutual connection, like, oh, hey, the guys over at XYC told me to give you a call. You know, if you can have a mutual connection like that, that is going to be even better. But then the next part is just to personalize your opener, is to say, you know, something very unique and worthy of comment. Where people make the big mistake is a very fake and generic comment, like, oh, I like your website. Don't do it. It's absolutely pointless. People get that all the time and they see through it. So unique and worthy of comment is what you need to go for. It has to actually be a sincere compliment. So it might look something like this. Hey, look, I was helping someone move and we were looking for an electrician in the area, and I had a few people recommend you guys. I went onto your website and yeah, I really like what you guys do. I see that you've actually been running for over 20 years. Or something like, well, look, hey, we've been looking for potential real estate partners in the area, so I wanted to find some of the top performing agents, and yeah, it seems like you guys are definitely up there. I actually saw all those houses you had for sale on London Road. It was nice to drive down and see all the signs. Must be good for brand recognition, right? Or, you know, very simply, I was looking for X in the area and I've had people recommend you. I went onto your site and loved XYZ. So the structure is how we came across this business and then putting in that personalization, what you like about that business. But be careful of the first part. You know, the more indirect we are, great, but then the harder it is to navigate that round to a sales conversation. And be careful with how much you're going to bend the truth, because if you're caught out, it is not going to go your way. But the pros to this approach: it has a much higher opener success rate. You will be able to get through and pitch a lot more people. And it's also great for breaking the guard, you know, putting someone at ease. You know, sometimes people can even think you might even be a customer. And also it's going to be easier for the delivery, making this approach a lot more suitable for a lot more people. But the cons of this approach, you know, some people can get really annoyed if they then find out you're a cold caller. And like all openers, delivery is absolutely everything. So it needs to be your focus. And, you know, you can get through the opening, but it will still raise someone's guard as soon as they know what you're actually calling for. So be prepared for that. You know, it does take a lot longer to do as well. You have to actually research and do proper personalization if you're going to do this approach, which can take a lot more time. So sometimes it's harder to push back on the objections you get if you have that indirect approach. Again, if you're not very obvious as a sales conversation, then you try and switch around and be nice and direct, say, oh, well, you know, push back on the objections. It's a lot harder to do with this approach. But like I said, cold calling as a whole is very difficult for a lot of people. So this approach, being a bit more personal, is a lot more suitable for the majority of people out there. But again, you need conviction. This can't be done without that confidence. And if you do it and you do get rejections, you are going to deal with a lot more polite rejections using this technique. That is the opener. Now let's go on to the next stage, which is the problem confirmation. So that is going to be where we just confirm that this lead has the problem that we help to solve. And it is going to be more simple. It's going to flow from the last stage that we went through in the process. So to work out how to do this for your own offer, to write this for your own script, you just need to think about the problems that you help to solve. And as we build no trust or value at this stage, sometimes we want to choose a bit of a broader problem rather than a very specific pain point. Because sharing your problems, very logical, objective problems, is a lot easier than sharing your deep pain, more emotional and more specific. So remember, you're a stranger at this point, so they're not likely to share deep pains with you, but they are likely to share surface level problems. So think about the wider goal that you help people with, and that will help you to address what type of problems. So if you are agency services, it's more clients. I would usually say something like, hey, look, I was recommended you guys, just came across, love what you do. Yeah, just actually wondered if you can actually take on many more clients at the minute. Because if they say no to that, I know that they have room for more clients, they have room for my service. If it is wealth skills, you're helping someone to learn skills. It's like, hey, look, so are you okay with the money you earn at the moment? Like, do you ever want to work a little bit more freedom? Maybe work for yourself, something like that. If it's health, it's like, hey, do you want to get in the best shape of your life? Or are you not able to stick to your diet at the moment? Or do you feel like you've got the accountability to keep you in the gym at the moment? Something like that to reveal that they have that problem. And it could be branding services. Are you happy with your current branding, or website, whatever it is? But again, it needs to flow from the last stage in the process, which means that if you went direct, you have to stay direct. If you went more indirect and personal, you have to stay a bit more indirect. So if I was going to use agency services as an example, if I was like, hey John, I just wanted to know if your day isn't going to be ruined with a cold call. Well, I can promise you there is definitely one you're going to want to hear. So I just wanted to know if you're actually happy with the amount of clients you're getting at the moment, or you think you can take on some more. So again, you're going to be direct, you're going to get a very honest answer, and if they say yes, you're going to have a really good call with this person. They know what it's about, they know it's a sales call, and they know the problem. So you're going to have a very high success rate in booking a call with this approach. But if you went indirect, it would look something like this. Oh, hey John, look, I was looking at landscapers in the area, and I've had a few people recommend yourself. I went onto your socials and actually saw that garden you've done with the koi ponds. Yeah, really great work, John. Well, look, you seem like you're busy, so I just wanted to know if you actually have much more room to take on some more clients over the next few months. What can happen here is they can say yes, oh, of course we have, because they don't know it's a sales conversation because you went indirect. So you're going to get through the opener 9 times out of 10, but where they go from here could be a bit more trickier to deal with. So with the direct approach, you get through that opening, you're honest about the problem, and if they have that problem, it's going to be a high success rate. But you'll encounter a lot more resistance. So the problem is that you could be dealing with people who are suitable for your service, but because you went, hey, I'm a cold caller, they didn't want to speak to you. So again, we've got to consider that. But then with the indirect approach, with a more personal approach, we can speak to a lot more people. If someone doesn't know you're a cold call, at least you're going to get a nice, honest answer to the problem confirmation. So if they say that they're open to more clients, and then you turn it around and they push back, at least you can use that in objection handling. Your problem confirmation is going to come down to your target audience and your offer. And some are a lot easier than others. Some you can stay very broad and you can master problem confirmation indirectly. But other times you're going to have to be a lot more personal and specific with the problem confirmation. And some people could get offended by that. Some people might push back a little bit. It can then reveal our intentions, which can then build some resistance. But remember, you're a stranger up until this point. So if you just ring strangers and point out problems that they have, you're basically saying, hey, I don't like this about you. Some people can get really offended. I have a principle for this. You cannot call someone's baby ugly. So when I used to sell website services, we had to tell people that their website looked bad. And it was like calling someone's baby ugly. Some people would get deeply offended. They'd either built it themselves or their relative built it, and it was really awkward on the conversation. So even though that baby was damn ugly, they wouldn't accept it, and the call ended badly. So when you're commenting on someone's business or even them and pointing out their problems, remember, they can get offended. So when it comes to problem confirmation, if you're pointing out a problem that you've found and the problem's a bit more specific, then try and just use objective facts. For example, with the website, I could comment more on someone's speed or functionality of the website, and that was something they couldn't argue with. So I said, hey, look, I went onto your website and yeah, it was really great. The problem is, it just wasn't really loading properly. that's a better in than, hey, look, your website doesn't really look that great. Do you want another one? So that's what we have to bear in mind. And if you feel like you're going a bit more personal and they could get offended, value pad it, especially if you're going deeper. You know, say something nice first. Remember with the personalization, we're saying something nice first and then we're saying the problem. Just make sure that the nice thing you say isn't about the thing you're pointing out a problem, because you can't say nice things and then say the opposite. It comes across very disingenuous. So say something nice about it, very similar to it, and then point out the problem. So write out your problem confirmation now. Ask yourself, you know, is someone likely to take offense from pointing out this problem from a complete stranger? And if you feel that you could get resistance, then mask it with a compliment first. So now we've opened up our call. We've confirmed that this lead has the problem. We are going to build some value and some trust. And that's basically where we're going to start getting into our pitch. So we're going to start by building these things. Now we're going to talk about who we are and what we do, but we're not going to oversell what we are and what we do. We're going to drop some little nuggets of value and trust in there. And here's what that's going to actually look like. So I actually run an agency that specializes in getting estate agents small market appraisals. We've been looking at a couple more agents to partner with because our new AI systems we've built have been filling up the agents' diaries we've been working with, and they can't take on any more business. So we actually really need someone who can take on these market appraisals, because we've got so many leads just sitting there, and our AI just can't pass them on to anyone at the moment. So you can see that I've built good value and trust. You know, I've said what I do, but I've used the language to suggest that I do it well, filling up the diaries, you know, pointing out the results of what I do. I have used their terminology, market appraisals, estate agents, to show that I understand their industry. I've created value by saying what my system has done. You know, like highlighted how my new system has been filling people's diaries. I have built more trust and authority than some annoying cold caller. Hey, look, I'm Connor, I'm from this, I do this. You know, I'm being more authoritative without trying to put myself in a position where I'm making out I'm better than them, I know more than them. That's where I'm going to clash with them. But I'm building authority by saying I do what I do very well. And more importantly, I have conviction and confidence in what I do. So I know what some of you are going to say at this point. Oh, I don't have any case studies, I haven't worked with anyone. But again, stop using it as an excuse. We are going to keep the format, but we're just going to say different things. So we're going to say something like this. Hey, look, so I actually just built an agency that specializes in getting estate agents small market appraisals. I've actually been working with a few people in the space who've been building these new AI systems, and they've just been filling up agents' diaries with appraisals, but no one's really doing it in this area. And look, I know it's not going to be long until people start clocking on, and that's why I built my agency. And I have the systems tested, they're ready to go. All I need now is just someone to implement it for who can actually take on all these new appointments. So again, I'm doing the same things, I'm just not lying about my situation. So stop using the excuse of, oh, I haven't got results to build authority. I can still do that. I'm still making out my position in a better way than just saying, oh, I'm a new agent, I just want to work with someone. You know, I've followed the same principles as the last, I've just adapted it to my situation. Lack of results, again, is not an excuse. So with your value builders, start with what you do and put yourself as an actual authority, someone who's an expert who does what they do at a good position. Be clear on who you help and what you help them to do. The terminology, the language, be specific. Build value in your offer by dropping in something that you've actually done that helps people or it helps you to stand out. And then tell them what the results of your offer are. You know, finish that you now need more people to do this for. And that is how you're going to build more trust and value on your cold calls so people are actually interested to speak to you. Now we're going to go on to our offer positioner. The next part is going to be how we position our offer and also where we're going to confirm the interest in our offer so we can get ready to book that call. And again, this is going to flow from the previous step, and it's essentially, if I could get that result for you, would you be interested? But something to bear in mind, the master framework is not to just get as many people onto calls as possible. Remember, it's where we sit in the process to pass it on to the next stage and prime them for that step. We want to get suitable, qualified prospects onto these calls so we actually have a chance of closing them, or they're actually going to show up. So if you've got to this part of the process and then they agree, they confirm that they have this problem and they are interested in you solving it, then you know they're going to be a good person to speak to. That is priming them for the next step in the process, not just trying to trick someone into jumping on a call with us. So some examples of offer positioner, like, hey, look, so if I put this system into your business, can you take on more clients? Or, hey, look, if I can fill up your diary with new clients, is that worth a conversation? So essentially, hey, if I could fix your X so you can do Y, would that be of something of interest? Would you want to speak to me about it? Would you want to find out more? That is the breakdown of your offer. So again, write this out for your own offer. What results do you get? How can you craft that around what you do? And finally, we're going to go for the call. You know, they've said they're interested. Now we need to go for the call, but we need to frame that call in the right way. You know, we don't want to just be dragged into an in-depth conversation right now because they're obviously interested about what we do. But it's a cold call, remember. We don't want to spend too much time in it. So trust is built over time with multiple touch points. You're still more or less a stranger at this point. So what we're going to do first is we're going to say something like this. Well, cool, look, I'm actually about to jump into a meeting right now, so I don't have time to go through it, but it would be great to jump on a call, so then we can go on. So we can't be pushed on questions at this stage because most people, if you get them ask a lot of questions, you're just going to get flustered. So remember, you're there to just book the next call. That's the purpose of the cold call. So now we're just going to frame that call. So it's like, hey, look, I'm about to jump in a meeting, so I don't have much time, but it would be good to jump on a call so I can just learn a bit more about you, your business, and I can actually share a bit more detail about how it works. You know, go through your questions. Are you free tomorrow? So we're going to tell them that we want to learn more about them first, and then we're going to go into details about our offer. But remember, this is just a triage call. We're not actually going to go through all the details of our offer. What we're going to do is we're going to sell the concept though. We're going to speak about it on a higher level, and then we're going to say, well, look, to make sure I can work out how it will work for you exactly, I need to do X, Y, Z. So can we jump on another call tomorrow so I can go through it and actually show you the system? Because again, if you're doing it on a phone call, then this is a great excuse for then getting them to the next step, which is a longer Zoom call on that triage call. We want to get this call in for the next day or the day after at latest because we want to capitalize on their interest because trust is built over time and touch points, but interest fades over time. So we want those distances between the touch points to be as short as possible. And the three things are going to happen here. They're either going to accept it, decline it, or raise an objection. But raising an objection and declining are all pretty much the same thing. Now, we are going to go through objection handling in other trainings. You know, we've gone through a lot today, so we are going to go through that in further trainings, don't worry. But when they accept that meeting, what we have to do is set very clear expectations. So we have to confirm the time and date, and then confirm the process, and that's how we're going to negate no-shows. So the affirmation, don't oversell it. It is a very simple, awesome, well look, I'm looking forward to it. That's it. Or, hey look, well yeah, it'd be great to go through it in a bit more detail. That is it. Don't oversell your affirmation. Come across as desperate. Then you proceed to book the day and time, confirm, and then you want to confirm your process. So you get the info you need to book that call in, usually email and phone. Then you want to make sure that they know exactly what the next step is. So, hey, look, so what I'll do now is I'll send you over a quick invite so you get it through in your diary. I'm going to send you a quick text over just the day before to make sure we're still good for the call. And then, yeah, if you wouldn't mind just sending me a text back to make sure you're still going to turn up. So again, we want to make sure that they have the expectations of what's going to happen after that call. And if you have anything to send them over, like a video explaining what you do, a little bit more detail, that always helps. Make sure they're aware of that. But again, you're only asking for a very small amount of time. So if it's like, hey, if you've got time, there's a video that I can send you as well that explains it in a bit more detail. It's only 5 minutes long. Again, if you say, well, I've got an hour-long video, make sure you watch it before the call, then they're not going to watch it, they're not going to turn up. But a big reason for no-shows, people don't confirm what the process is. They're like, oh, great, yeah, I'll see you then, and that's it. So confirm the process. Send them over an actual invite to their email, and then remind them of the process, because if you don't, they're not going to show up. And it needs to be a human response. Don't rely on automations. They don't work. People are so used to them, they ignore them now. And also a big one is, they send them over something that they haven't agreed. I've seen so many people say, oh, let's jump on a quick call, and then send them over an hour-long Zoom link, and they wonder why they don't want to speak to them. Again, you're asking for a small amount of time, and it needs to align what you ask for and what you send them. So follow these steps in the framework. Now write your script based on every step and what's more suitable to you, what style is more suitable. Make sure you are practicing your script religiously so you can recite it from memory. And put your efforts into the deliverability of that script. Do this, and I absolutely assure you, you will fill your diary full of appointments from cold calls. And my last thoughts on cold calls. I see it every single day how effective it is. But what I also see every day is how ineffective people can be at it if they don't practice it, if they don't focus on the skill. Because cold calling is a skill. You're going to suck at it first. There's no avoiding that. But the only way to get better is through practice. And remember, if you have the skill of turning strangers into people who pay you money, you will become a very valuable person. So I hope you have enjoyed this training. You have the tools now to absolutely master cold calls. And if you want some example scripts, then hit the link below this video and you'll get access to those scripts. But also, we know cold calls is the first step in the process. Doing a triage call correctly, doing a closing call correctly, having the sales skills to actually close more deals is what I want to give you. So if you want to get more training in sales, then again, there's a link at the bottom of this video. So make sure you click that and you'll find out how you can get access. So hope you've enjoyed this one, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.